Greenwitch by Susan Cooper, Chapter 13. In the farmyard, in front of the house, a great round piece of granite was set into the ground, an old mill wheel, worn and grass-fringed. On its bright flecked gray surface they set the Grail and gathered round as Merriman took from his pocket the battered little cylinder that held the manuscript. He slid out the small roll of parchment, its edges cracked and flaking, and unrolled it to lie on the uneven stone. "And this is the second time for looking," he said. The children picked up stones from the grass and laid them gently on the edges to hold the parchment flat. Then, instinctively, they drew to one side and let Merriman and Captain Tom study the Grail and manuscript together. Barney, next to Merriman, suddenly realized that Will was standing quiet and unmoving behind him. He ducked quickly aside. "Here," he said, "come on." The golden Grail glittered in the sunlight. The engravings on its sides were clear and clean, but the smooth beaten gold of the inside surface, as Simon had said, was blackened and dark. Will looked now at the close, delicate engravings for the first time in his life, seeing the panels filled with vivid scenes of men running, fighting, crouching behind shields, tunic-clad, strangely helmeted men brandishing swords and shields. The pictures woke deep memories in him of things he had forgotten he had ever known. He looked closer at the words and letters interwoven between the figures, and at the last panel on the Grail completely filled with words in this same cipher language that no living scholar had been able to understand. And like the other two old ones, he began methodically to look from the marks on the old manuscript to the marks on the Grail, and gradually the interweaving became clear. Will found himself breathing faster as the meaning of the inscription began to take shape in his mind. Staring at the manuscript, Merriman said slowly, painfully, as if he were spelling out a hard lesson, "On the day of the dead, when the year too dies, must the youngest open the oldest hills, through the door of birds where the breeze breaks. There fire shall fly from the raven boy, and the silver eyes that see the wind, and the light shall have the harp of gold." He stopped, his face tight with concentration. "Not easy," he said to himself. "The pattern is hard to keep." Captain Tom leaned on his heavy stick, peering at another panel of the Grail. He said softly, his accent cradling the words, "By the pleasant lake the sleepers lie. On Cadfan's way, where the kestrels call, though grim from the grey king shadows fall, yet singing the golden harp shall guide, to break their sleep and bid them ride." Will knelt down beside the granite slab and turned to the Grail again. Slowly he read aloud. "When the light from the lost land shall return, 6 sleepers shall ride, 6 signs shall burn, and where the midsummer tree grows tall, by Pendragon's sword the dark shall fall." Merriman stood upright. "And the last line of all will be the spell," he said, looking hard at Will. The deep-set dark eyes bored into his mind. "Remember, ye mayn't, ye mer, my nidiod, yin canu, ac man, agor wilds, in dod. The mountains are singing, and the lady comes. Remember." He leaned down to the rock, moved aside the stone weights, and took up the small curling manuscript in one big hand, as if the Druze did not exist at all. He looked down at Will and Captain Tom's. "You have it all?" he said. "Yes," said Will. "Safe remembered," Captain Tom said. In one sharp movement, Merriman clenched his fist, and the little roll of stiff, broken-edged parchment crumbled instantly into tiny fragments. Small as gravel, light as dust, he opened his long fingers and swung his arm wide. And a dusty shower of pieces flew away in every direction into oblivion. The children cried out sharply. "Gummery!" said Jane. Stared at him. "You've ruined the whole thing." "No," Merriman said. "But you can't understand what the Grail says without it. No one can." Simon's face was creased with perplexity. "It'll be just as much a mystery as it was before." "Not to us," Captain Tom said. He eased himself down to sit on the granite slab and took up the Grail, turning it in his fingers so that the sunlight glinted on the engraved sides. "We know now what is the hidden message of the Grail." It will shape the next 12 months of our lives and help us to save men from great terror very soon for all time. And now that we have it in our minds, we shall never forget." "I've forgotten it already," Barney said plaintively. "Everything except the bit about a golden harp and a grey king. How can you have a grey king?" "Of course you have forgotten it," Captain Tom said. "That was the intention." He smiled at Barney. "And we do not even need an enchantment to help you forget, as our friend from the dark did. We can rely on the mortality of your memory." "And you don't have to worry about whether anyone else will remember," Simon said, slowly, understanding, "because no one else will ever hear or see." Jane said slowly, "It seems a pity that the poor Greenwitch's secret should just be thrown away." "It has served its purpose," Merriman said. His deep voice rose a little, gained a hint of ceremony. "Its high purpose, for which it was made so very long ago. It has set us the next great step along the road to keep the dark from rising. And there is nothing more important than that quest." "That last bit you said from the Grail in the manuscript, what language was it in?" "Welsh," Merriman said. "Is the last part of the quest in Wales?" "Yes." "Are we going to be part of it?" Merriman said. "Wait and see." They lay in variously abandoned attitudes in the sunshine on the beach, recovering from an enormous picnic lunch. Simon and Barney were lazily tossing a ball to and fro without bothering to stand up. Bill Stanton was eyeing them, and the nearby cricket bat with nostalgic optimism. "Just wait," he said to his sunbathing wife. "We'll show you just exactly how it's played in a little while." "Great," said Fran Stanton sleepily. Jane, lying on her back, blinking up at the blue sky, propped herself up on her elbows and looked out to sea. The sand was hot against her skin. It was a beautiful, sunny, breezeless Cornish day, of a rare and special kind. "I'm just going for a little walk," she said to nobody in particular, and over the dry sand she went, across the long golden beach, toward the rocks that glistened with low-tide seaweed at the foot of Kamar Head. The headland reared up above her, grassy slope changing to jagged gray cliff. At the very tip, the cliffs towered in a sheer wall against the sky. Jane's head was full of memories. She began to walk over the rocks, wincing a little as her bare feet, not yet toughened by summer, pressed against the rough rock. Out here last year, she and Barney and Simon had reached the peak of their adventure, the achieving of the Grail that had lain for hundreds of years in a cave, the entrance covered totally by water, but at all but the lowest tides. Out here they had fled from the pursuing dark, with the Grail and the little lead case they had found inside it. And out here, she thought, they had reached the furthest point of the rocks, with the waves breaking white at her feet. Just here, in the flurry of saving the Grail, the little lead case had plummeted into the waves and down to the bottom of the sea, and the Greenwitch had found it there and made it a precious secret. Jane looked at the deep green water beyond the breaking waves. "Goodbye, Greenwitch," she said softly. She unclasped a small silver bracelet that she wore on her wrist, weighed it experimentally in her hand, drew back her arm, and threw it into the sea. To throw it into the sea. A voice said gently behind her, "Don't do that." Jane gasped and nearly lost her balance. Swinging around, she saw Will Stanton. "Oh, you made me jump!" "Sorry," Will said. He balanced his way forward to stand beside her. His bare feet looked very white against the dark seaweed patching the rocks. Jane looked at his pleasant round face, and then at the bracelet in her hand. "I know it sounds stupid," she said, "but I wanted to give the Greenwitch another secret to keep, instead of the one we took in my dream." She paused, embarrassed, and went gamely on. "In my dream I said, 'I will give you another secret,' and the Greenwitch said, in that big, sad, booming voice, 'Too late, too late,' and just disappeared." She was silent, gazing at the sea. "I only said don't," Will said, "because I don't think your bracelet would really do. It's silver, isn't it? And sea water would turn it all black and dirty looking." "Oh," said Jane, forlorn. Will shifted his footing on the wet rock and felt in his pocket. He said, glancing briefly at Jane, then away, "I knew you'd want to give the Greenwitch something. I wondered if this would do." Jane looked. Lying on Will's outstretched palm was the same small green patched lead case that held the manuscript. The Greenwitch's first secret. Will took it and pulled off the cap, shaking out a small object into her hand. Jane saw a strip of yellow metal gleaming with some words engraved on it very small. "It looks like gold," she said. "It is," said Will. "A low carat, but gold. Lost forever, even down there," Jane read out. "Power from the Greenwitch lost beneath the sea." "That's just a line from a poem," Will said. "Is it really? It's perfect." She ran her finger along the bright gold. "Where did you get it? I made it." "You made it?" Jane turned and stared at him with such astonishment that Will laughed. "My father's a jeweler. He's teaching me to engrave things. I go and help him in his shop sometimes, after school." "But you must have done this before you came down here, before you ever knew we were going to meet the Greenwitch," Jane said slowly. "How did you know what to make, what to write?" "Just a lucky chance, I suppose," Will said, and there was a polite finality in his tone that reminded Jane instantly of Merriman. It was the voice that forbade questioning. "Oh," she said. Will put the small golden strip into the case and fitted the cap on tightly, then he handed it to her. "Here's your secret, Greenwitch," Jane said, and she flung it into the sea. The little case vanished into the waves, their form curling round the weed-fringed rocks. In the sunlight, the water glittered like shattered glass. "Thank you, Will Stanton," Jane said. She paused, looking at him. "You aren't quite like the rest of us, are you?" "Not quite," said Will. Jane said, "I hope we shall see you again some day." Will said, "I'm pretty sure you will." And let's pause there.